and welcome back to our Greek gods and goddesses stories. We've heard some great stories so far, some great myths that have told us all about the gods of the ancient Greek times. In the last story, we learnt all about Artemis and Apollo, and Artemis was certainly a force to be reckoned with. Would have nothing to do with men that she turned a suitor of hers into a deer and let his dogs rip him apart. Now, I think that's probably frowned upon right now, but she certainly was fairly stern and quite an admirable woman, I would say. In this story, it's called The Two Loves of Apollo, and we're going to be talking about Apollo and Hyacinthus. Now, I know a hyacinth's a plant, so I wonder if that's got anything to do with it. A god who thinks the world of himself must, of course, live at the centre of the world, no matter that the spot is guarded by a dragonish snake. Apollo simply wrestled it to the ground, rattled till its brains coddled, coiled it up like a rope and sent it onto the tripod. "From today you are my oracle," he said, staring into the snake's bloodshot eyes. "Let the magic of this place rise through the legs of this, your three-legged throne, and speak of times to come. The whole world will come here to question you. That means the whole world will come to the temple of Apollo, here at the world's centre." And they did, of course, because if there is one thing that humans crave above food and drink and wealth and love, that's what fate holds in store for you. Kings and heroes come from every corner of the Mediterranean and the oracle. They ask, "Will I win this war? Who should I marry? What must I fear? How shall I die?" The answers screamed out by the oracle in his frenzied, bansheed wail may sound senseless, but somehow the visitors always make sense of them. They make their tributes to Apollo, the god of prophecy, and some whisper that Apollo is as great a man as Zeus, but not if Zeus is listening. People come to Delphi for another reason too, for the Pythian Games, which Apollo holds there. Some whisper that the games are as splendid as those of his father Zeus, but truly there was never anything to match the Olympian Games. They draw the greatest sportsmen in the world, gods and demigods, heroes and princes. No slaves, no foreigners are allowed within sight of the sound of the field. They run and jump and throw the javelin and the discus, wrestle and compete as though they're losing to win or die. The only prize is fame and a wreath of the green bay leaves, which the victor immediately tosses into a bonfire as a tribute and thanks to Zeus. And by the end of the games, that bonfire is a hill of pale blue ash, higher than any man could jump. No one has won more laurel wreaths than Apollo. Still, he had been unlucky in other ways. Apollo had a friend, a little boy with lilac eyes and fleecy hair called Hyacinthus. No one in Greece would argue the boy was as beautiful as any god. He only had to enter a room and it was as if a torch had been lit. A window opened on a warm night. Everyone loved him. Everyone wanted to have him to themselves, like a work of art bid for at an auction. Everyone wanted to own Hyacinthus, but Apollo won him. Hyacinthus thought the world of Apollo. He'd take him riding in the sun's chariot and teach him how to play music and throw a discus. So Hyacinthus neglected all his friends, including Zephyrus, the west wind. And here's a picture of them at the Olympic Games. It seems really strange to watch sportsmen run with nothing on their top, but of course that's how they did it then, and it was so warm anyway. Zephyrus could not bear to see Apollo and the boy playing and laughing together. He howled in the trees and the sea caves, hissing with envy through the treetops. Then he swore that if he could not have Hyacinthus, no one else could. Apollo took Hyacinthus to the Olympic Games to show him off. His javelin flew as fast as a speeding arrow and his discus whirled like a planet across the sky. He was magnificent. Even those who pitted themselves against him had to admit it. The muscles flexed around his legs and shoulders like golden ropes, binding a lion, and his mane of hair quivered in the sun. Hyacinthus was there in the crowd, singing, "Apollo is the victor of victors, a laurel crown for Apollo." And Apollo smiled in his direction and waved. Then he bent back, spread his arms and began to whirl. The discus in his hand might have been the sun itself, he put such power into the throw. But he did not see Zephyrus. No one did. There is no one seeing Zephyrus. He is just a tree tossing, a breeze in the face, a sudden sharp tug of the back of a cloak. As Apollo let fly the discus, Zephyrus flew. The breeze caught Zephyrus blew. The breeze caught the bronze disc and carried it wildly off course. It would have carried much farther than any other, but instead it veered into the crowd. And you guessed it, it struck Hyacinthus just above the ear. He was dead before he fell from the bench. Before he touched the ground, Apollo was there to catch him, but Hyacinthus was mortal. There was nothing Apollo could do about that. "Oh, Zeus, don't let this beauty go for a lost in the world forever," Apollo pleaded, distracted by misery. And Zeus threw down a handful of magic like a farmer sowing a seed. Hyacinthus no longer lay in Apollo's arms, he was gone. Instead, a little flower grew where the boy had touched the grass. It was the colour of his eyes. It was the feel of a warm night through an open window, and its scent steals to unseen visitors. No living soul can describe the sound of Apollo's sorrow that day, but Hyacinthus can. Inscribed in a deep purple on every petal in the hyacinth are the very words of his grief, I. And here, look, just as I thought maybe, is what's known as a hyacinth flower. And it's beautiful. My goodness, Zephyrus couldn't have Hyacinthus love himself, so he threw a breeze to kill him. Gosh, what dark stories the ancient Greeks told. And you might be forgiven for thinking that were more like a fable, telling you the dangers of greed and envy and jealousy. And sometimes in these stories they do feel a little bit of a fable. They want to teach a story to people in ancient Greece. Well, that was another great story, wasn't it? So tune in next time when we're going to be finding out about Demeter and the princeling, how Prince Demo almost became mortal.